hello everybody, and welcome to the DM's Book Club, which I could totally annoy Fiona with and just butcher the pronunciation of it by calling it the Dungeon Masters Book Club or the Club of Books. Just mix it up just to really annoy you. My name is Ryan. They shouldn't really put me in charge of anything, but here I am yet again on episode 10, I think.
Yeah.
It is 10. There we go. And this very enthusiastic person you can hear just bickering in my ears and correcting me. Who are you? What's your name?
Oh my God, who am I? I'm Fiona, of course.
Yes, you have been here every time.
I've been here most times.
Silly question. How are you? You're right.
Yes, I'm very good. I only know that it's episode 10 because we've just finished recording episode 9. So that's the only reason.
Let them peer behind the wall like that. There's
what are you talking about?
For a reason.
Oh, it's fine. Nobody cares.
They do. It's been exactly a week and we have not talked to each other and we've, got everything in our heads.
Yes.
Nothing blocking us.
No.
What do we have to look forward to? What are we learning about today?
So today, I'm the chooser of this topic. I've chosen the short adventure called I.S.T.A.R Facilities, a sort of, let's say, a Dungeon Master's Notes or a small sort of corporation of a module, essentially, of a game that was run by the author Patrick Rothfuss for his friends at a convention called PAX East in 2016.
And his friends is quite a loose interpretation of
friends.
Chris Perkins was in it as well. So
Chris Perkins,
this was definitely a module run under very high pressure. And this was the first one he'd done, right? Am I right in thinking that?
As far as I'm aware, so context. So when 4th edition for D&D came out, Wizards of the Coast did a collaboration with Penny Arcade, this sort of online webcomic strip. And the two sort of creators from that, so we got Jerry and Mike Krahulik, and they did like a series of podcast episodes sort of detailing the inner sort of interests and coming up with this concept of Acquisitions Incorporated, which essentially boils down to some sort of ragtag sort of group of adventurers who decided instead of just being adventurers and doing it for good, they'd make it into sort of a corporate model and act as a business. And actually, it makes kind of sense. You think if adventures were a real thing in the real world, they probably would unionize or have a headquarters of some sort. So that's sort of how it came about. And as now almost over 10 years on, they now have like certain members of the team have either retired and they are joined by a rotating cast of what they call interns. So obviously you've got the people at the top, so Oben Dron, that's played by Jerry, and Jim Dark Magic, which is played by Mike Krahulik. And then they'll be joined by other interns or other members of AC Inc. And one such member is Patrick Rothfuss's character, which is called Viari, who's a very flamboyant, should I say sexually charged bard that never gets the girl or never gets what they want.
Oh,
and interestingly, so they started, as I said, sort of podcast episodes, and they started moving to Twitch and online streaming stuff. And then because Penny Arcade started doing conventions, so PAX essentially, they were like, well, this is quite popular. Why don't we start doing live performances and live shows? And get the DM, who at the time was Chris Perkins, one of the lead writers on many of the D&D modules, as many people would know, to run it. So it was a way for Wizards of the Coast to sort of showcase certain new ideas and certain new modules and stuff, and they'd travel around not only the USA, but also in Australia, for example, because they had some connections there. And this is an interesting one. So PAX East, I think at the time, was a bit of a smaller convention. And for whatever reason, Chris Perkins was able to come, but hadn't got any new material to promote, or was just like, you know what, let's try something different. So he invited Mike Krahulik and Patrick Rothfuss to write one-shot episodes that would be canon, but then allowed them to take the light and to allow them to come up with something that was in their world. And it was really interesting because then Chris, as a result, got to play a character, and he played quite a famous character, which is Drist, which a very overpowered, legendary drow with all these magical items and stuff. But he played him sort of very straight-laced, not overtaking all the other characters because they were a bit lower level then. So in this sort of show, Mike Krahulik did his first one, which was How Not to Host a Murder Party, which, again, is a really, really good showcase of ideas and stuff. Obviously, there's a murder party, and then someone's actually murdered, and you have to work out who it is and stuff like that. But all very comedic, all very fine. And then the spotlight moves to Patrick Rothfuss. And when you watch the video, it's very interesting. You can see how nervous he is. And I think not so much because he maybe... I mean, I assumed it was his first time running a one-shot. But as you said, right, like, the pressure to run a good game, not only with an audience of maybe 500, 600 people in an auditorium, being streamed live around the world or recorded live around the world, and your own DM, who is a very famous, well-known DM, also playing in your game. It's a lot of pressure, and you can see him being quite nervous. He decides to stand throughout the whole thing, which is like an hour and a half. And I've always been like, God, I think I've stood once for a session, and that was just because there was no chairs.
Yeah, that's tough to do. That's standing desk problems. But and actually, the fact that he was nervous and the fact that he was new to this, I actually think you can tell based on his publication, because it's not just a module, is it? There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes at the beginning about how to set up for it and how to prepare for it and things you need to do and information you need to take down. It gave me an impression of being a little bit sweet in that way. Like, it's just quite like kind for people to get into it. I mean, was that your impression? Is this a good place for people to start if they haven't DM'd something before? Would it be something you would offer them as an option, or maybe a bit more advanced?
I think it's definitely, you can take the structure of this, because it says right at the beginning, it's an experience. I always love calling RPG sessions experiences, but it's designed for 4 less than optimal level 7 characters,
Yes.
Played for entertainment purposes. So I think that sort of statement instantly puts it like, okay, so these players that you have are going to be a bit more high level, so they can take a few hits, they might have some cool things, but it's for entertainment. We shouldn't be worried about all the rules and worrying about like, oh, but if I do this and do this. So I think from the get-go, it instantly gives it to the DM, and hopefully the DM, whoever you are, tells the players like, look, this is going to be a silly one. We can make it canon, we can make it not, but ultimately the idea is to have fun. And I think a lot of the times that's an interesting thing, because I think, how can I put it? So some D&D shows which I watch have clearly got an amazing story and people have come for the story. So Critical Role, for example, ultimately, it's not upstart comedy about all these crazy kooky characters and, we're hijinks, hooray. You know, there's a story, there's political drama, there's tensions, and the same with sort of High Rollers. And that's sort of, and that's a way to engage people. And that's something that people come back for. They love that kind of story. It's very, very engaging. But sometimes different styles are also valid. And I personally love watching Acquisitions Incorporated, because you have sometimes quite serious things, but these characters at the forefront of their agenda is like, how can we make money as a business model for it? Because they are inept businessmen, essentially. And I quite like that they always like, but how do we further the franchise through this option? And being able to use social interaction rather than hitting things and making it video gamey.
And definitely, and this is a module that is not designed as an optimized, min-maxed combat scenario encounter. There's lots of different stuff going on here, showcasing different skills, different play styles. I really like it. Like, it definitely is refreshing. And yeah, you mentioned before, you actually sat us down and ran this for us, our typical and usual D&D group. And so I got to play as a player. I very rarely get to play as a player. Yes. And because of that, I'm not a very good player. I forget rules all the time. I don't optimize how I play. I forget abilities. I'm terrible at it. For somebody, I like to think I'm quite a good DM in terms of remembering things, but playing, it just all goes out the window. And I really liked this module because it was really accessible in that way. It sort of allows you to do different things and to sort of enjoy different like skill sets and styles. And yeah, there's something that was really refreshing about it. When I was going through it though, just out of curiosity, did we do everything or did you strip certain bits out of it?
So I'll quickly explain what it is.
Sorry, that's probably a better place to start. Yeah, what are we dealing with? What is I.S.T.A.R, which I definitely pronounce as I.S.T.A.R. That's 100%
I.S.T.A.R or anything like that. Yeah, I think I pronounce it I.S.T.A.R. I think because that's how Patrick did it in the one shot, but it doesn't matter essentially because it's an acronym. But essentially, your friend, a certain in the module, it's counted as Dreadlord Viari, is the head of the local Zentarum guild or any guild. It doesn't matter which, but has had to go away. Is away on business or whatever because there's been a big accident and he was hurt in it. But also one of the sort of guild masters essentially was killed in it, and it's basically trying to like hush that up a little bit. But whilst he is away, he's employed your characters to sort of just take care of business, and just all you have to do is just make sure nothing goes wrong, which again is the perfect start to any story. It's like nothing's going to go wrong. I don't think anything's going wrong. It's basically
just check for me. Yeah.
It's what I say in the office when I'm about to go on leave. It's like, I don't think there's anything.
Nope. I think I've used those exact words before.
Anyway, so, you spend a couple of weeks like bossing around underlings and, just generally enjoying this sort of prestige that you're getting from being in quite a high power position, and with the promise that you might get further up in the black network, as the Xantarum company is called, essentially. And then one day you have one of the underlings come to you and go, there's a problem. I've been told I need to speak to Viari about this. You tell him specifically if this ever happens. And you go to a room you've never seen before, and there is a little signal that comes up and it says budget overrun, I.S.T.A.R. And that is the start of a whole journey where you discover that Viari has set up this sort of program, which is the intern selection, training, and ranking program to get into this guild thing, and something is wrong with it. And there's mixtures of like, well, what's going on? He's not here. Well, we should go sort it out. And therefore, as a result, the party has to go through this whole sort of facility and combat various things. And what I quite like about it is that it's got some very typical sort of D&D tropes, but in a very corporate setting of ranking and reviewing and stuff. And ultimately, it comes back to the DM's discretion on things. And we'll go into the rooms and stuff like that in a second. But the idea that it doesn't matter, if they do succeed or not, do they make you laugh? Does the player do something and you go, that's really cool? Then you should reward them for that, and then mock other people if they haven't done so well, or gently mock them. And that's what I find is interesting. We talked about it before, where sometimes there's this relationship between the DM and the players where it's like antagonistic, like, oh, the DM is out to kill us, or oh, the players have just ruined my plans, they don't listen to me. Whereas this, you have to impress someone who, is not going to be cruel. So sort of doing a competition which is collaborative, but then each player becomes out themselves because suddenly they want to be the best at something that doesn't matter.
Oh yeah, you literally dangle a carrot of competition in front of people, or give like a medal out or something, and people jump at it, don't they? They just can't help themselves. It gets really, really competitive. Yes. So what you're describing then essentially is just one long D&D job interview. It's like the D&D version of some horrific multinational staged, here's the group task, and now you've got to go away and do the interview, and this is the bit where we look into your background, and it gives me the creeps even thinking about it.
Yeah.
But your characters, they're not the ones actually doing they have to do the process in order to work out what's wrong with it, but they're not specifically there to become interns because you're already high up the black network effectively. So this is purely doing it to test.
Yes.
I do like it. That corporate sort of aspect of it is so unlike D&D, and I do get that. It's really, really, really funny. What happens then? The characters, you've got like 4 inept level 7 characters who are not optimized at all, and they make their way to the I.S.T.A.R facility. What happens?
So you first start off with possibly, I think, the best puzzle at anything you can throw at players who have been used to sort of high fantasy stuff. It's just a simple entryway, which is a turnstile, and signing a liability waiver, which again, peak corporate health and safety, and then giving some money as the application fee. I've definitely spent, I think, maybe, because I've run this through a couple of times, I've definitely spent maybe, would be the second longest room, I guess, because people are like, well, there must be something else in this room, and looking for anything else to do. Like, I go up to the grill where the voice is coming from. Is there magic on the turnstile? Does it teleport us to another place? And I'm like, well, no, it definitely gets you from A to B. And
it's totally harmless, but looks ominous. That perfect combination.
Exactly. And I think it's, again, it's something I learned recently in improv, is that the best kind of scenes and the best kind of role play is just doing something ordinary in the extraordinary. So again, like having a gate or having an entryway, which has a straightforward thing of like, oh, you signed this and you pay a fee, as the voice sort of does say to you, or there's a note saying, oh, you need to do this. But then other people will try and cheat their way around it because, oh, well, I've got magic. Oh, well, I can do this. And it's interesting because sometimes you would not do that you don't do that in the real world. But I think because video games have told us it is, or we've read books or seen films where you have like James Bond working out a new route of that. People are always trying to find new creative ways to be original and get outside the box. And it was hilarious just to sit there listening to people talk and just trying not to break and trying not to laugh and being like, yeah, absolutely, you can totally try that. It doesn't move. It's a metal turnstile. I mean, well, there's definitely ways to get around it where you could just teleport, you could phase or whatever, but you won't be scored points, and it's just interesting to see people's definitely a game that I appreciated playing in person, because seeing people's cogs turn it's an incredible thing. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I seem to remember being stuck by that turnstile for some time. It was definitely ridiculous. So let's assume that the party make their way through the turnstile. What happens then?
Yeah, so obviously, I'll say this now because I forgot to say at the beginning, massive spoilers for this if you are playing it. But I think, but it's like 4 years into it now, and I'm sure someone will have run it for you, or you should run it yourselves, or at least read it through.
Definitely, you should run it for people. If you're listening to this, you are number one candidate to run this.
You know what? That is totally you should be listening to this and expect spoilers. So
exactly, we're spoiling it for you so that you can run it for other people.
That is true.
It's just you are making a sacrifice,
and we salute you for it.
We do. We are saluting right now.
Right now. It's incredible. Wow. So in sync. So the first room that you come to, and that's the thing as well, it's a good sort of way, because it's just simply 5 or 6 rooms all in succession, and they only have to get from point A to point B. There's, they can try and go through sideways and split up, but ultimately they will end back on the same path. And each room is themed to be a very adventure style thing, or very something that is very typical. What I like to think is something that will always happen in a D&D session. I feel like there's that sort of expectation from Ideal, what happens in an RPG system where you are the heroes and you take back the village and you slay the dragon and everyone loves you. And then the reality is that you're all making jokes, you're all fluffing lines, you're all going, what did I do? Oh God, I rolled a natural one, my sword's over there. Because it's a comedy of errors. And there's a mixture of, like, again, like I was saying before, you've got the critical role standard of the story comes first and all the players are part of it. Or you have the AC Inc., which is the players shape a lot of the world, but don't break it as you would do like a better version of a video game, if you see what I mean. Like you're testing the rules and trying new things, and if the DM likes it, you're going ahead with it. You're not stealing the spotlight per se, but you're using it to improve other players. Like, oh, they did something really funny, well, I feel offended, I've got to do something even better, and by accidentally one-upping the other person, etc.
Absolutely.
So the first room is, I think it's my favorite room, because it's definitely something that I've been doing throughout the whole series. And it's just simply called the catchphrase room. And the challenge is you go into a very typical D&D setting of a tavern, you have training dummies, or there's like someone behind the bar, etc. So it's just sort of stands out like that. Typical scene. And the voice instructs you that you have to do let's see what it said, demonstrate your ability to attack an enemy whilst using a catchphrase.
Already, my disappointment was palpable that if you've never watched the TV show Catchphrase, that's what I thought this was on about.
That would have been really
randomly
good.
Run into the room with a shiv going, do you know what it is yet?
You know what it is. Say what you see. That would be amazing. That's a different one shot that we'll have to write up. It's different reality shows. But then the last line is that you will be graded on originality and delivery. And again, it comes into that thing where it's like, oh, well, this is a process for interns to make it to the top. So every party member has to do something in order to succeed. And so instantly you're like, well, so-and-so goes first, they do this, and you're like, oh, well, I got to come up with something better. Because we're always trying to come up with one-liners and catchphrases and stuff. But then I think you did this, actually. One person just was like, sod this, and tries to go and open the door on the other side, which they get shocked as a result, because they're like, no, you have to complete this process.
Yeah, that sounds like something I would do. It's interesting, because this whole module, and this room is a good example of that, it's designed that every single person in the party has to do something. Yes. Everyone has to do it. Sometimes in D&D, if you want to be a quiet player and you don't want to do much, you can let other people do it for you. And like if you've got maybe an overpowering personality who has lots of good ideas or is really effective, they can kind of run away and deal with a lot of this. But in this particular module, everyone has to do it. Yeah. And that's quite good, actually, getting people involved. I quite like that.
Absolutely. I think it's also nice to see, like I said, like seeing the wheels turn, but also the catchphrases and stuff. Certainly if you've created characters just specifically for this one shot, like obviously your character, like again, later on, you shout death from above, just land on top of an adventure.
Yeah,
that was that made me laugh so much, because it was just so
I was
sudden.
playing some sort of halfling called something small fellow or something like that. I can't remember what it was.
Very positive, happy person.
Yeah.
And then David's character of like just a horrific, flirtatious, like a Prince Charming type character. So
I
constantly.
think it was more Zach Brannigan than Prince
Zach
Charming.
Brannigan, of course,
Yeah.
my bad. And it was just, there was just some bits where I was just like, I'm so glad this is not real.
Yep,
But again, it's that sort of, you are playing a very exaggerated versions of people that aren't necessarily horrid or like you're like, not this guy. But then it's like they're being genuine about it, which is I think it's a very hard line to sometimes to play against, I guess. You get to the next room, which is the treasure room, which, my God, it's a great idea. And I think this is the one thing I would improve about it. It is far, far too long.
It's very complicated, and this is sort of what I'm saying. Of all of the rooms, this one really does like take a little bit to get your head around, because so the way it sort of describes it is that obviously it's split into sections, right? And you've got different areas of this treasure room, and I think so. The idea is that players have to dump as much value into a hopper at the end of the room as they can, right? Yes. I think that's the general style of it.
That's correct, yeah.
But my God, the amount of DCs and different checks you can make on this page, I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and essentially, it's one, certainly for us, I made it so that it was a map so people can see. In the show itself, it was all theatre of the mind, and it just took a long time. The one thing that was good about it, they took out, basically it was an action to go get something and then an action to go put it into the hopper and vice versa. There was just no point in like running or doing anything like that. But there was so much to it, and with of massive spoiler, a gelatinous cube in the corner with a very high valued item in it, and so you have to make that choice. Yeah. Of whether you want to go in and get it or fight this creature, etc. And so Treasure Room is really good, but it is over a minute. So that's 10 rounds, essentially. And
it took a long time when we did it, but I don't know if we were just messing around and trying to be clever when actually all you had to do was just run and pick stuff up.
No, and this is the thing. I feel like the Treasure Room is and this is the thing I would improve. I think the Treasure Room is a great idea. Like, I think it makes sense because you're competing against each other and I'm going to spoil the one shot a little bit, the recorded one shot. In the one shot, the other players were playing off each other. So one person would go grab something, and then the other person would use command to make them give it to them, so that they could put it in
help each other very well. No.
But that's okay, because then again, it's that idea of creating competitiveness over something very, very small and doesn't mean anything. And I think that's quite good. I think what I would do though, I would cut it down so it would be just 30 seconds, and just making it shorter, and so you don't have time, because I think there's a lot of times for us and in the recording as well where people are like going, what can I see, what can I do, and stuff like that. So they only have a limited choice. So what would they go to right now? What they can all see the same thing from where they start. Do they go straight for the scepter? Do they go straight for, there's like a lab with lots of bits and pieces on it, like books, potions as well. There's some potions that you could take, and 80% of the time you could get something like everything smells like bubble gum. You don't understand any spoken languages. You can't stop laughing. You look like a flump, but retain all your stats and abilities. And again, it's that sort of like all these ideas, I think, crammed into one. And definitely, like I said, in the live show, this took the most amount of time, but it was the most fun.
Yeah, but I guess you've got to have a good party that sort of, we'll get into it. And then the longer you go into this, the more rounds you have, the quicker everybody gets at trying to do stuff. And generally speaking, and it's all about just getting people to come up with good ideas and use their heads, but at the same time, keep that sort of frantic movement behind things. And I like the idea that, the movement is just deemed to be, you either move one place or you move to another. You don't count feet out. I think we actually did it with a proper room, a map, didn't we? But I get the impression that you don't have to have a map effectively.
I think it was just helpful. I think just because I know myself, I'm very bad at describing things or forget something. So at least with the map out, I could remind myself what was out there. But then I think we did fall in that trap of going, well, I'm going to move over here. I can just make it. I was like, that doesn't matter. But I will say my favorite line in this whole module is there is a voice, so sort of a grill sort of thing that sort of gives the instructions out in each room. And the one in this room just starts off by saying, style isn't enough to pay the bills. And I was like, that is so true. Because obviously in D&D, you're acting as heroes. You're like, haha, I've got this. And you say the catchphrase, but then you're also there to take the jewels. You're there to take the treasure. And you have to have that horrible corporateness of like, oh, well, I do need some money, actually. I can't reward. Like, I think I must have played in one game where I go, no, reward is not needed. And I'm like, no, it's always needed.
It really is. And I like the fact it then says right at the end, Intel hopefuls are reminded that all treasure removed from a testing room will be transformed into venomous, acid-infused spider bees, which I just love. And then there are actual stats for venomous, acid-infused spider bees right at the end, which does that really made me giggle. I don't know.
But that's the thing. It's that sort of style of humor. Like, there's some bits I think don't hit very well, and some bits do. But there's just a way you're just like, this is just going to be silly, and it's how what makes me laugh. Like, the best bit, sort of for me, at the end of the treasure room is tallying up the results. So you could be like really sort of picky and be like, well, they did this, they did that. But I feel like if you picked a player who's done something really smart, you could give them the gold medallion, so like you've come first, and then obviously lower down you get what the last one, which is like between sort of 10 to 5 GP worth of treasure. They receive a tin medal labeled participant, which again I like that, because that's again very corporate, like, well, you tried. Like,
I like the fact that it doesn't actually say what you get if you get less than 10 gold. Like, it just doesn't even bother with
it. Just assumes you're going to put something in.
exactly it just throws anything. So what happens after this room? Let's say they deal with the treasure room. Mm-hmm. Where do they go now?
Oh, well, you see, I did say that the first room, the catchphrase room, was my favourite room. I think that's a lie, because I forgot that the team building room existed. So in this room, before you enter, and what I liked, I think I described it as like each door has like the big sort of symbol on the big corporation symbol on it, and then you have like room 1, blah, 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 catchphrase room, etc. And this one was room 3, team building room. And then at the front, there was like a font or a little table with stones on it. And it says, please take 1. And you can't enter the room without taking a stone. And then it's just perfect. I think because it talks about like, well, you've all been competitive so far individually, and you come into this room and there is a 15-foot gap. And there's like a really deep pit, essentially full of bones and some awful, horrible things. You're not entirely sure what's down there. And then on the other side, between you, sort of a 10-foot balcony, 15 feet gap, and then another 10-foot balcony is the door. And it sort of says, right, now you got to work together, team building, and you've got all these sort of tools and stuff that are found in wooden containers. They've got random things like 50 hammers, a bed sheet, all these other random things that you're like, what do I need to use this for? Like proper team building exercise. But then it says, right at the end, lastly, note that magic has been deactivated in this room. So instantly the spellcasters go, what? And then also you've been randomly assigned a performance countermeasure, and to showcase your ability to overcome obstacles. So the stones do something to you, whether your limb turns to stone or you're suddenly holding a kitten that you realize if you drop at any point, you will burst into flame, which I absolutely love. You can only speak in rhyme was the other one I think we tried, which was great. And all sorts like that.
That was good.
It's, again, seeing people compete against each other and then going, oh God, it is an actual exercise. Again, watching people figure out like, okay, I've got silk cord, what else do we got? And then trying to communicate with all these countermeasures and then trying to get people across. But then underneath it all is just a line that says, by the way, magic hasn't actually been deactivated in this room.
Yeah, that got me, because I think you had phrased it in a way that was like, if you use magic, you're cheating or something like that. And I was like, oh no, I can't even do that. That's horrendous. I can't, because I have magic to my disposal. Because 15-foot gap it's not the biggest thing in the world. You could, in theory, very easily get past this thing. It's a really, really easy thing. I like this room. This room is really, it does make me laugh, because this is one where the DM gets to have a bit of fun, because you know that it's a really easy thing to do, and you know that it's very easily circumnavigated. This is the time reading through this entire module that I realized that there were chandeliers everywhere.
Yes.
Because it mentions in every single room there is a chandelier in this room. There is an invisible one in this room. I assume that's some reference to the Acquisition Incorporated.
So Patrick Rothfuss's character is always looking for a chandelier to swing from. So again, it was that sort of thing where like, oh, and by the way, there's a chandelier in this room. just a bit, and as if trying to entice the characters in that particular one shot to use it. And it's stuff, I think I did mention it once or twice, but ultimately, like, it wasn't very important, because you guys, I think it was important at the end. I think because you jumped off a chandelier. But apart from that, I think you all worked it out quite fine, really.
No, we got there eventually, and actually this room probably took us the least amount of time to get through. We breezed through this one in the end once we all figured out that we could actually work as a team. We weirdly were working as a team by this point. I think we just abused each other so much in the room before that maybe we had a crisis of conscience or something. I'm not entirely sure. here we go. We're getting through it now. We somehow skip room 4 and we've now immediately gone to room 5. I don't know about that.
This confused me on the day as well. I think it's just a formatting issue. Again, the one shot's slightly different for some reason. I can't remember why. But this sort of, this penultimate room, I will say, the MML Memorial Acid Pit Training Room, which again is reference to another intern in Acking who's called AFL, who was played by Will Wheaton, actually. And he just kept falling into acid pits constantly, like really bad rolls of the dice and everything like that. So this was sort of immoralized and made a reference to that, which I thought was quite
really,
nice.
really good. Yeah, it's full of references, this. But this is one thing to say. There is a lot of reference to Acquisitions Incorporated, but I don't think it's unfair to say that you don't need to know any of that coming into this module. Like, you can play it straight up without issue. It's really good fun for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they have deliberately changed. Like I said, this is more like we've put together the notes from the thing and they've changed certain things. I think because Acking is now a copyrighted name and stuff, so that's why it's a Zentarum Guildhouse or than Acking one. But again, like it says, it doesn't matter. Like you said, it's like as long as you take the structure and you can do whatever. And the other thing as well, it says you could add in your own challenges or other rooms. You don't have to use all of these rooms. They're just a nice way to do it. And I think it's quite nice to have like the two competitive individual tests, as it were, and then these two are like the more team building ones, I think.
And you could very much add your own rooms in if you can think of them and chuck stuff in or change things around or change the order or
absolutely.
No, I really like it. And so this is the next room, the acid pit room.
Yes.
So this is it's an interesting one in terms of how to describe it. Of all of the rooms, I struggled getting this one mentally into my head the most in terms of how it's all described and how it's actually visualized. So how would you go about sort of explaining this one?
Yeah, I would agree with this as well, because we didn't I remember for us, we didn't use a map for this one. But essentially, you have, it's a platforming section, essentially. It's a large room. You've got to go across certain different columns and islands that are just over sort of 5 foot deep pit full of green acid, and you've got to just sort of jump from one to another, etc. And it's up to you to find a path. There's no map. It's something you can create. So I think ultimately, if I was going to do this again, I would probably make a proper map to help people out visualize it. But again, it's one of those things.
This one kind of needs one. Yeah,
it kind of needs one. But I wonder, like, because maybe I did draw one at the end, but it wasn't a to scale one. And so people will just, again, maybe not helpful. But again, if you like similar to the treasure room, maybe it just takes an action to move from one to another rather than like feet, I guess, because otherwise you're just going to be like, I can make it here, but then you've got to make several checks to jump onto various sort of columns to make sure you don't fall in the I almost said lava then, the acid. It's very similar. But I think, but the best bit, I think, really is at the end, if someone gets there on the ledge, you see a large gong with Elven script put into it, and you hope that someone would be able to read it. Like I wondered if I would change this to maybe some other scripts, maybe like uncommon or one that I know one character has, perhaps maybe the person that's furthest back, I might change it to that thing, but they can't read it. And what it says is, whatever you do, if you value the life of your companions, do not hit this gong.
Did we hit the gong? I can't remember if we did or not.
I think somebody, this is the problem, because we never released it in the end, so I can't remember what we did. But what happens is that if someone does hit the gong, the columns slowly start going into the acid, making it a bit of a rush for time to get people there. Because obviously, as soon as you're in the acid, you're starting to take damage. And I think it says at the end, once everyone is across, or at least everyone who's still alive, the door opens to the next room.
So it knows that you may lose some people. That's hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. And also it does say like, you can help them, assist them to get them out of the acid, etc. and stuff like that. So again, having two sort of rooms that are competitive at the beginning and then focusing on the teamwork, I think again, it just gives that sort of, again, if you're only just starting out playing D&D or maybe in a party, so maybe this is a good idea to be like, you can shine as an individual, but together you can overcome obstacles which aren't necessarily fighting and on combat and stuff. Again, going outside the box to go and help people. Like you might suddenly be able to, use your mage hand to steady a foot going up over the top of a column whilst you're slowly going into the acid. I don't know.
Yeah. You come up with all kinds of things. It's really cool. I like that sort of element of, it's either, you could change it to make it quite competitive, couldn't you? You could say that like, it's the first person across gets extra points or something.
It makes me really think of The Floor is Lava, that new game show that's on Netflix, where It's basically, they have like a house with all these different rooms, like the basement, the library, and then the floor is lava, and you have to jump from the various different objects and pull
It
ropes
does
and
look
stuff like that.
amazing. It really does.
It's incredibly American. Like, they have like what's it called? Like not flashbacks, where it repeats. When he goes, "Oh no!" goes into the. And what's great is that they're told that once you're in the lava, like, pretend you're in lava. So they'll scream, and then they'll go underneath the lava thing, and then they're like, "No, Karen!" And then she doesn't appear back. And you're like, oh my god!
I love it. I would love it if they actually did die. That would be, incidentally, a hilarious show. So we're assuming that what's left of the party have made it across the room.
Mm-hmm.
What happens now? What goes on?
Well, again, this is another one of my favorite rooms, where again it sort of ends up in another large room, which is very, very corporate. You've got a coffee machine, you've got several bean bags. Again, I like to think of it as a startup office now. You've gone from sort of the fantasy sort of elements, like you've got the tavern, you've got the treasure room, you've got the acid pits, you've got the team building exercise, and now you come to the worst environment of all, the difficult terrain that is the office.
Yeah.
And you've got a large desk and a swivel chair, and a chandelier, of course. And there's a big reveal, revealing that the guildmaster, Clef, hadn't died, or kind of had died, but we're not sure, because he is now a golem. And the idea is now you have to put your training together to negotiate your contract, essentially, with this golem. But then you're like, well, how do you defeat? Eventually, you just have to defeat it and kill it. But the coolest thing about it, and it's maybe again something else I would maybe reincorporate in some of the other rooms, is that it talks about remembering your training. And it talks about, like, if you say a catchphrase or do something cool, which is like sort of stagey or something like that, that will, if you're attacking with a non-magical weapon, that damage will be inflicted. And I remember we struggled a bit with this, because again, the treasure room took so long, I think it came out of people's heads that, you should say a catchphrase, you should try and be funny. So maybe I'd have, like, I don't know, motivational posters around the wall, like, hang in there, or blue sky thinking, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I'm having a look at the stats of the monster fight that sort of comes in this room, and the contract negotiation that you have to deal with. It's actually quite a complicated creature to have to control. Like, it's lots of different stuff, and there's one particular action it's got which does make me laugh.
Is it the one I'm thinking of?
Which one do you think I'm thinking of?
Is it have a magical day, motherfuckers?
That's the one.
Yeah.
I do love that. That's really, really good.
I think it's one of those things where you've got to imagine, like, it's an office environment, a sort of a corporate stuff. And again, Clef is a reference to, in Acquisition Incorporated, they had a guild master or a servant of some sort, or an assistant, that was called Jeff, who did die. And then when this reveal happened, because Jeff was supposed to be a really nice guy, he now obviously was really cross because obviously he died. And so saying, have a magical day, motherfuckers, it's very Die Hard-esque. It's very like, and it was just, again, it's just brilliant how, like, you can make it as corporate and nice, and like playing the opposites. We've talked about this before, where you're playing a creature that's seen as evil, but maybe is programmed in a way, or is thinking in a way that is doing right, but it is so weird by our standards. Like, again, the ordinary in the extraordinary. So
yeah, exactly. But I think actually, in terms of the remembering your training, using the catchphrases, it's quite funny, because it's a combat encounter that could be really hard, but is actually quite easy once you use all the mechanisms. And yeah, it's really clever. I do like it. And then once that's defeated, we're pretty much at the end of the adventure, aren't we? Everyone comes out.
Vaguely.
Literally. And then there's a sort of hilarious reveal at the end.
Yeah, so the ending of this story is that the Dreadlord Viari comes in and is like, oh, hi guys. I obviously came back, and it turns out the budget overrun has only been that the bin with all the fees from all these interns that have died has overrun. So he just picks it up and, like, sort of like waves you off and maybe flicks you like a platinum piece, and that's it. That's the end. Just a cold, dead ending. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. And I quite like that. It just shows you that it is definitely a comedy piece.
Yes.
Yeah, I really like that. There's an element to this that it's a bit of a story. It's lots of different adventures, lots of different problems. Yeah, it's really good fun.
There's I can't remember what the name of the books are now, but basically there was used to be like parodies of like the Harry Potter books called like Barry Trotter, and then there was one for the Matrix. I can't remember, but rewriting it, but again being completely parody. And I just remember the end of the Matrix one saying Neo he was called because he had a lisp or whatever, and he was Neo turns around, starts walking away, goes, "This has been a complete waste of fucking time," and that's what I feel happens at the end of this party. Everyone's just like, what? We did this for nothing?
One of us is dead.
Yeah. Poor Brian.
Yeah, exactly. No, I like that as well. There is something quite funny about it all. I mean, yeah, as an adventure goes, I think it's a really good combination. I mean, would you take new players or like more experienced players into it? Do you think it kind of works for both? I mean, what would be, when would you bring this out?
I mean, I've only really used it as sort of a one-off thing. Because I've always said that I'm a really bad DM. I just can't plan beyond a session or two. But I feel like this is something you can implement in any city in the Forgotten Realms, because there's always going to be a guild of some sort, whether it's the Zentarim, whether it's going to be an Acquisition Incorporated branch, because obviously now they have their own book where you can put in some of the rules that they've started using. But the idea that there is a facility that hires adventurers, but they need to pass an initiation test of some sort, but it is so full of admin and liability waivers and traditional things like that, I think is perfect. Because I think, so as a player, you're used to these sort of things, or you'll be aware of them. But as an adventurer, it's like a 2-level thing where you're like, I, as an adventurer, as this, I don't know what a waiver is, and then you're going, oh god, having to work with that. So the two levels, I think, is good fun, and and encouraging that creativity between players, and like I said, the outshining of one another, but then giving that spotlight over to other people and making sure they have equal time is also really important.
Yeah, that's really, really good. Yeah, that sort of sharing the equal time and sharing the spotlight and giving everybody a chance to shine, I think is really important, because it is a game where it encourages you to come out of your shell. And if you are more a sort of person who can come out of their shell with more confidence and with less effort, then it will normally reward that. And maybe the quieter people, this is a good time to let them out.
And I would, the other thing I'd say as well is, again, something I've learned from doing improv.
Improv.
Clang, 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 I know.
Yeah, so I haven't mentioned that before.
Maybe a little bit. But so one of the big rules we get asked, or we get told about really early on, is that being boring is totally fine. And it's actually interesting. Some people will really, like you said, sometimes you think, oh, I need to do something smart, funny, witty, and clever to go into a scene, to role play, to fight the fight. And then people get stuck on the sidelines going, I don't know what to do. So as a DM, obviously, you can narrow down the things. You go, oh, well, you can go hit the creature and do this, or you could go do this. You limit it down to 2 options, which is what sometimes I do with really, really new beginners. But ultimately, if I say, what's the first thing that comes to mind in this situation? And you go, oh, I'll just do this. But it's boring. It's not original. I say, well, original doesn't have to be, it doesn't matter. Boring can be funny. Some of the best scenes I've done have been about, like I said, the ordinary and the extraordinary. A scene about HR in an adventuring guild, or in a space station, or under the sea or something. It's the fact you would still react the same, though just certain elements are changed. You don't have to be like, look, a kraken, a squid, you don't have to draw away that attention. And I think, again, the creativity and stuff is like, what would you say? And if it makes the DM laugh, because it's so, I don't know, out of character, or it's just so bizarre in the situation, you're going to get points. And that's the thing I really take away from this, is that I enjoy running it, because every time I've run it, different things have made me laugh, and I can score points on it. And ultimately, I feel like these sort of modules, I have an equal, if not better, time than the players, which I don't know what that says about me as a DM.
But that's important, actually. The modules have to give a DM a sense of fun, and a lot of the campaigns that you can run just give the DM nothing but logical puzzles and lots of stats and initiatives and things to remember, because things are getting really complicated. But this is quite fun, because the actual rules of this entire module are very loose, and they're very just flexible to allow that sort of play. So as a DM, you've got a lot of scope to just let people do what they want to do, and you can throw a couple of checks at them as you need to. But it's rewarding imagination rather than character build.
What would you add to this then, Ryan? What would like, any rooms or any things that you would change about this yourself?
I think that's just that. I think I'd add probably more rooms if you wanted to make it like more in depth. Say, I mean, this is built as a sort of 2-hour adventure, I think. So if you wanted to bring it to like 3 or 4, then you could add more rooms and draw. I quite like the idea that you don't need a map in this. I have to say, like it's all about describing. I think definitely some modules come complete with a bit of a bio describing a room at the beginning. Maybe this module could do with something like that. You know, when it's just like you walk into a room, there is moss on the walls that stand here, and there's light on whatever. And just to give people a bit of imaginative like spiel, it relies on you reading it and then sort of translating it yourself. So maybe that's what I'd add. But I mean, generally speaking, I think it's a very well put together module. It's very good fun.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add from this is that, because I love the idea of corporate stuff. Like, again, I've said this several times now, but ordinary and extraordinary. And I thought, where else could you put something like that? So I was thinking of stuff like a motivational company away day with the Adventurers Guild. Like
Absolutely.
Going into a forest and hunting down something, but you have to do it. You have to be paired up with certain people from like HR or the admin staff.
Like Karen from accounts.
Yeah, exactly. Or even or going to sort of a conference for adventurers was the other idea I had, with lots of keynotes from various people and having seminars. And then the final one I had, which I think fits more into this sort of style, is like having almost like an apprentice style like thing where they have to go do a task, but there is another team that has maybe if we consider as B-list adventurers, maybe they're like the A-list or double A-list adventurers, and you have to battle between their egos and stuff, and then you have to, if you're the losing team or if you're the winning team, depending on certain checks and stuff. I thought that would be quite fun as well.
That would be good. I was thinking there's a problem with the staff canteen. You've got to go and find out what it is. Or maybe HR want to make a particular division redundant. You've got to go and have delicate contract negotiations with them or something.
Because you're the best. No,
you are literally the only person who said yes.
Yeah, exactly like that.
No, I like it. It's really good. I think you could definitely build this into a longer term like campaign. This is something that you could definitely like trying to sort of wheedle your way up some sort of big corporate structure. I like it. And
I'll say the last thing actually was, so I was thinking of other things that are similar to this. Also, I've mentioned The Apprentice and stuff, but actually in D&D there is recently been the new Rick and Morty dungeon style, which I've run through with David and Sam, and that's been interesting because again, that's written in the style. Actually, Stranger Things as well, the D&D starter set, is written in a style where it is like it's from a fictional character's perspective, but acting as you. So in the Rick and Morty one, you're acting as Rick, as a DM. So you have to, it says in the thing, you have to act like this and you have to say these things out loud. And it sort of breaks the fourth wall. You have to burp, you have to do stuff, and generally just not give a shit about your players. And I found that really hard to do, but I intensely enjoyed it because it's just seeing two people who were like, oh, we're going to play a one shot. Fiona's not told us what it is. We're going to make really fun characters. And I was like, just sat there evilly. And then just seeing them sort of realizing that this whole place was just awful. And just like
I need to have a look at that. Actually, it does look
I'll send it to you across. But one of my favorite rooms, apart from the famous sort of Mr. Meeseeks room, which I think that's when they both knew something was wrong. There's there's a route, like a door into another room, which is just a mouth, and you have to role play the mouth, and it asks you a riddle or something like that. But it says in the notes that you have to be expressive with your mouth and use your tongue and everything like that. And then whilst they're discussing it, you have to keep interrupting and then making horrible noises with your mouth as if you are the door. And I was like, tick, tick, tick. This is me as a DM going, I can do things with my mouth, so to speak. But yeah, like stuff like that, which encourages the DM to be silly because it says it so in the book. And you're like, that's what it says. I have to do it like this. But it gives you that, I guess, that freedom and the confidence to do something because it's come from something else or a different character that either you admire or don't. And I'll say this, I don't mind Rick and Morty. I've got to that point now where it's like, okay, but I just love the way the DM in this was so powerful and so like, oh, I don't care about any of these. And like even the final boss fight, which is massive spoilers, you come in as Rick and defeat the monster because they're taking too long. It's just like, okay.
I love that. This is a really, really good module. It's one of those ones where I come away from this and I'm like, you know what? I would want to play this with somebody. Like, it's really, really good fun. I'm scanning a list of people in my head. I'm like, oh, they haven't done it. Yeah.
Yes, that's the issue. Is that once you've done it, it's
exactly.
Yeah, but it's still good fun.
And I'd have to pretend that I didn't know what was happening and do it again anyway, just to have a laugh. Yeah, exactly.
Ryan, I don't suppose you've prepared what we're reading next time at all.
Well, I had thought about it.
Good.
Yes, I have a topic now. In my usual way, I knew you were doing a module. I knew you were doing something that was sort of specifically like, here's an adventure for you to do. So I thought I'd bring it a little bit back onto more of the world building, like back into sort of how to build worlds and use the books as they're given to sort of create a bit of, I don't know, like your own sort of space. And specifically, I thought we would talk about the outer planes and different planes of existence in D&D and heaven forbid, being able to make your own heaven or whatever plane you want to do. So we're going to be looking at the Dungeon Master's Guide and having a look at some of the rules on planes and specifically outer planes, because it's a big old chapter. So that's where I wanted to dip into.
Nice. Oh, cool. I actually, again, as I always say this to you, I've never read anything about those places. So
it's like you haven't read the Dungeon Master's Guide.
No,
God.
I've got it.
Honestly, you need to sit down and properly get through it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that would be really good. Thank you for that, Fiona. I really, really enjoyed. Where can we find more of your intelligent chatter if we needed more and there aren't any more episodes because we've listened to them?
Intelligent chatter? You mean rambles of a mad woman who's been stuck in her house for many months?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, that's what I meant too. I keep saying this. My name's Fiona. I run the What Am I Rolling podcast, which is a twice monthly RPG one-shot podcast. It's doing very well. Episodes are still coming. Episodes are still coming out.
Well. The growth is exponential. It's amazing.
As I mentioned, I either it's happened by now or it is happening. But I will be on a panel about how to GM different RPGs at UK Games Expo Online, which is some weekend in August. I'm really excited for that. I think there's people from Adventurers Wanted and some person from Modifius Entertainment who are famous for creating the Star Trek adventures and other RPGs on there. So I feel like I'm in very good company, and there's just me as is on a podcast or two podcasts. So so come check that out.
The podcast machine. This episode is likely going to go up towards the end of August, right? Or maybe even September.
Yes.
Possibly. So I think it would be legitimate for me to say, it's really good that you recovered after that performance, honestly. I mean, you were so brave. All that happening and you just stuck in there.
Yeah, I just can't believe so many people died. Yeah.
That wasn't even in the game.
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And hey, you want to come find me? My name's Ryan. I just Google Ursa Ryan and come find me on YouTube. It's got nothing to do with D&D at all. It's great. I'm literally, Fiona scoops me up and makes me play a game I really enjoy. Actually, you can come and find our old Xerios episodes on that channel. So if you want to go and have a look at the craziness that we talk about, or refer to about 4 times a podcast episode, it's all up there. And until then, I think we're all going to see you next time. Or no, not see you. We've learned you're going to hear us, and we're going to have no interaction with you whatsoever. So just shush.
Shush. But email. Do email. We've got an email. I keep forgetting.
All right. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Why are we so bad at ending?